I think it should be working now. All right. So let's get to the first story. So President Donald Trump has called himself on several different occasions a very stable genius. Also saying things like, I'm a very smart person, right? And because of that, his followers have set out to prove it on many different occasions. Now, this latest one was noticed by Twitter user Christoph, who discovered that some of the more conspiracy-oriented Trump supporters, and that means a great deal of them, let's be honest, are using a less than reputable site, IQtest.net, to claim that Donald Trump has an IQ of 156. At least. So now he broke it down in a series of tweets here. First, he said, interacting with online Trump fans means you're never far from conspiracy theories and cultish nonsense. Sometimes if you follow them down the rabbit hole, you'll come across something special. And by the way, this is something that has been around for quite some time, apparently. But now some people are starting to notice. Now, the tweet quoted by Christoph is from another user who said, you will have your eyes opened in 2020 big time. The reason being, he is brilliant with the IQ of Einstein, which is why many don't understand what he's doing in draining the swamp. Now, let me show you what that is based off of, right? And it's not just something that this person just randomly made up out of whole cloth. No, there's an actual thing that it's based off of. So that chart is real. The meme, however, not real. And as you can see, they insert Donald Trump with 156 IQ. And again, this is actually based off a real study, sort of. But let me explain, right? So now this original chart is based off a 2006 study conducted by the University of California, Davis psychologist Dean Keith Simonton. So now he basically tried to look at guess the IQs of all the different presidents based on historiometric approach to estimate the results, since there were no IQ tests, right? And so Donald Trump, we don't know if he has an IQ of 156, but that was a real chart, a real study that somebody shoehorned Donald Trump into, and then erroneously claimed that he's got the IQ of Einstein. So yeah, okay, so that happened, right? Now, so according to this Trump supporter, right, we're the dumb ones, the people that question this, right? Because we can't see the brilliance in Donald Trump draining the swamp by filling his cabinet full of criminals who then do crime and then get arrested. Okay, this is what I call pretzel logic. Not because it gives, it's salty and gives me dry mouth, right? No, it's because of all the bendiness involved in having to believe it. If you have to twist yourself into a pretzel to believe something, it's probably bullshit. Just saying. Now, this is by the way, this person continues. And I'm not going to do the Twitter handle because this person is, not very smart, obviously. But she continues by calling on people to research the Q movement. Now, the Q movement, QAnon, short for QAnon, is a conspiracy that there's somebody in the government, codenamed Q, who was very, very high up, who was working with the Trump administration to unmask a giant pedophile ring in the highest levels of government. And yes, they say that, it's mostly Democrats. Now, look, is it a stretch to think that people in power or that people who I should say are not good people are attracted to having lots of power? Yes, of course. Look, very powerful people have been predators. You had, for example, Jeffrey Epstein and Dennis Hastert and many, many others, right? But to think that this is an organized, widespread pedophile ring, that's a stretch, right? Also a stretch that Donald Trump is intimately involved in exposing this alleged ring. And any minute now, he will come out and he will say, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. We got all the pedophiles out of office. I mean, look, here's the thing. Here's why it's ironic, right? Donald Trump himself has been accused of rape. Not only that, but barging into dressing rooms in the set of Miss Universe while young teen girls were changing. So that's a bit of a problem. Anyway, and this is a couple of examples. Now, getting back to Christoph, he says, I thought this lady was taking the piss, but as far as I can tell, I checked her other tweets, she's for real, and thus I discovered a website which details Donald Trump's alleged IQ of 156. And he posts a link to it. Now, that website, look, let's just lay down a fact here, right? You cannot take an IQ test online seriously. You just can't. It's like those fun little quizzes that you see on Facebook. What kind of astrology sign are you? I mean, what is your age based on the burger you ate today? I don't know. Like, it's ridiculous, right? But it's all in good fun. Okay. Now, again, even sanctioned IQ tests are controversial at this point because, again, you can't really tell much from their IQ score. Okay. But yet, Donald Trump uses IQ score as a measure of self-worth. And so that's why he goes around saying, I'm the smartest, I'm the greatest, I have the highest IQ, et cetera, et cetera. And his followers, of course, believe it. When in reality, it's just junk. It's junk science. It's BS. Okay. Anyway, so now Trump, by the way, if Trump had a high IQ, he would have released it by now. I mean, but as usual, just like his taxes and his school transcripts, he does not release them. Maybe because he's embarrassed. Maybe because it's not really all that high. I don't know. I don't know for certain. But anyway, the website claims that Trump has a high IQ of 156, and it uses this reasoning. Donald Trump has graduated from the Wharton School of University in Pennsylvania in 1968 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics and Anthropology. Mensa does not accept SAT scores from after 1994. However, Mr. Trump was a student at Wharton when it was possible to derive an accurate IQ test scores from known SAT scores. Given the usual requirements for admission to a top school like Wharton, I estimate that Mr. Trump has a 156 IQ at the minimum. That's what the site says. Ridiculous, right? No, you know what Donald Trump had? He had daddy's money. Legacy admissions, massive donations. Look, you can easily buy yourself a spot at higher institutions of learning. That's likely what happened to get him there. But look, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bad student. Again, we don't have the transcripts, we don't know. But we do have something that we do know. And that comes from people who had actually were teachers of Donald Trump and fellow students. Now, one teacher, professor, was the late William T. Kelly. Now, Mr. Kelly taught marketing at Wharton School of Business and Finance for a total of 31 years. So now, let me give you an excerpt from an article in Alternet from a friend of the late professor. Quote, Professor Kelly told me 100 times over 3 decades that, quote, Donald Trump was the dumbest goddamn student I ever had. Now, this was before politics. This was before all of that stuff, before he ran for office, right? Back when he was a businessman. Now think about it. You had to make a really, really bad impression for someone decades later to remember how bad of a student you were. I mean, just think of the impression, man. Think of having Donald Trump as your student. Now, I love this quote, right? He says, this is the friend. I remember his emphasis and inflection. It went like this. Donald Trump was the dumbest goddamn student I ever had. Kelly told me this after Trump had become a celebrity, but long before he was considered a political figure. Now, Kelly had often referred to Trump's arrogance when he told the story that Trump came to Wharton thinking he already knew everything. So that kind of explains it, right? Now, then we have other people who actually went to school with him. Another biographer, before I get to the fellow students, another biographer, Gwenda Blair, wrote in 2001 that Trump was admitted to Wharton on a special favor from a friendly admissions officer. The officer had known Trump's older brother, Freddie. Now, Steve Perelman, a 1968 Wharton classmate and former Daily Pennsylvania news editor, said this about Trump, quote, "He was not in any kind of leadership. I certainly doubt he was the smartest guy in the class." 1968 Wharton graduate Louis Calamaris recalled that Don was, quote, "loath to really study much." That explains it. Calamaris also said Trump would come to study groups completely unprepared and, quote, "did not seem to care about being prepared." Now, if all that sounds like it's right on the nose, yeah, you would be correct. And it's exactly what he does right now that he's president. And he claimed that he didn't need to know anything about North Korea before going into negotiations with North Korea. You've got to be kidding. Now, so now again, that's actual people that went and worked and went to school with Donald Trump. Should probably trust those people over some whack IQ site. Which, by the way, this IQ site also seems to have the IQ scores of Sheldon Cooper and Batman. Now, if you're not familiar with those people, they don't really exist. Batman's not a real person. Neither is Sheldon Cooper. So, that's what they're doing. All right. So, look, here's the thing. A lot of Trump supporters are easily duped. I know. There are studies that show that out of all the people that consume fake news, Trump supporters consume the most fake news out of any group. And so right now, this is another example of Trump supporters using fake news to reinforce their biases in favor of Donald Trump. This is cult-like behavior. They are so desperate to believe Trump's lies. Oh no, he's the smartest. He's playing 12-dimensional chess. Look, this is why it's impossible to get through to them. I mean, look, I'm not saying that everybody, who's a Trump supporter is entirely lost. No, people can eventually wake up and see truth and see the facts for themselves, right? Playing out right before their eyes. They don't need somebody like me to tell them, right? In fact, studies have shown that the more someone like me tries to get through to them, the more resistant they are to actual facts. This is an awakening that they have to come to themselves, right? And they have to realize, oh, it turns out Trump is conning me. He is a con man. Wow, and he's not doing anything that he promised to do. Well, what happened to that wall? I can go to that spot and see that there is not actually a wall being built. The facts speak for themselves, man. They do. They really do. But look, they've got to start the process themselves. But to the overall point there is, this is why we've got to stop worrying about what Trump supporters will say. Most of them don't even live in the same reality as you and me. So what we need to do as progressives is focus on people who do have an open mind, who are interested in facts, and who aren't, maybe people who aren't engaged, but could be, but are open and receptive to reality. That's how you grow a real movement. Okay. Let's move on here. Let's go to the next story.
Well, immigration is not part of my portfolio, obviously. I think everyone should be engaged in the full force of the U.S. government.
That was Ivanka Trump dodging a question about family separation. So now she was asked this on Face the Nation by host Margaret Brennan. And this is in the context of her speaking out against the disastrously cruel family separation policy, which seems to go against not only Melania Trump's Be Best campaign, because how can you really be best when you're locking kids up at the border, but also trying to help families and promote, causes that help women and children, as Ivanka was trying to push. So now let me give you more of that context, and we'll kind of break it down.
Whenever anyone hears you talk about the importance of being with your children, they also think about your personal, and you were vocal in your opposition to the family separation policy when it came to immigration
Yes.
and the U.S. border. You said that was a low point for you.
Correct.
We went and looked, and Homeland Security says there are still around 900 children who remain separated from their families. Is that something you continue to remain engaged on when it comes to immigration?
Well, immigration is not part of my portfolio, obviously. I think everyone should be engaged, and the full force of the U.S. government is committed to this effort to border security, to protecting the most vulnerable. That includes those being trafficked across our border, which this president has committed to countering and combating human trafficking in an incredibly comprehensive, aggressive way. So the full United States government has been focused on this issue, starting with the president.
So, well, that was a lot of nothing. Notice how she pivots, right? She goes from, kids in cages to, oh, they're being trafficked. Well, there's no real way to tell that they're being trafficked specifically, or to tell that she's actually talking about what host Margaret Brennan was talking about. And that's, of course, unaccompanied children being, or not just unaccompanied children, but also families being separated at the border. So she completely changes that conversation into something else. But okay, so it's not part of her portfolio, right? Well, okay, what is? What is your portfolio? What do you do there, right? What do you actually do in the White House? I'm very curious, because to me, it doesn't seem like she's doing anything other than, of course, sitting in meetings with world leaders to make deals for her own personal gain. I mean, she's done plenty of that. But look, Ivanka's non-answer and deflection is one thing, but let me go and just address Brennan, right? She didn't push back. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't follow up. She didn't do anything that she's actually supposed to do as a journalist. Why even have Ivanka on if you're not going to ask her tough questions? I mean, look, here's the thing, though. Ivanka Trump brings nothing to the table. Literally, she's completely unimportant. And yet here you have people like Margaret Brennan slobbering all over themselves to try to get Ivanka to come on their TV shows. For what? Nothing. Why? Because she's, she's president's daughter. Of course. Look, all this does is that it raises her profile and makes her look legitimate, even though she's nothing more than a glaring example of nepotism. And if you hate what Hunter Biden did, getting put on the board of Burisma and getting paid a lot of money, boy, you should also probably have a problem with Ivanka Trump, who knows nothing about policy, being one of Donald Trump's advisors. Oh, but Jeff, she's not getting paid. No, but she is getting access to world leaders. And because of that, you can think of all the Chinese trademarks that she had just gotten, which have helped her private business. It is corruption, but maybe not quite as blatant as the Hunter Biden case. So let's be fair, but it is corruption. Okay. So look, how she deflects, right? Let's go to that. Oh, everybody should be engaged. That's funny, because she literally said she's not engaged. She just said, it's not my portfolio. I'm not really, it's just not my thing, but everyone should be engaged. No, she's just like Donald Trump. That is basically the all lives matter of answers. So now, here's the thing. It's not just 900 children. And going back to Margaret Brennan here, she said about 900 families haven't been reunited. No, it's actually human rights organizations are saying that it's several thousand children that have been lost to their families, largely due to the ineptness of this administration. This is an issue that the government had created. This is a man-made problem. And yet Margaret Brennan did not hold Ivanka's feet to the fire for what the administration that she is part of has been doing. It is absolutely shameful that this is our corporate media. It's another great example of it. And another good example of why you should not have Ivanka Trump on TV. Okay. Moving on. Now, the first report on the effects of Donald Trump's trade war has come in, and it's not good news. Now, according to a report from economists at the Federal Reserve Board, Donald Trump's tariffs have been an unmitigated disaster for the sector that they were supposed to help. So now, let me give you some snippets of this report written by Aaron Flan and Justin Pierce. These are two senior economists at the Federal Reserve's Industrial Output section. So now they say, quote, the first comprehensive estimates of the trade war's effect on American manufacturers shows that the tariffs have hurt the industry more than they have helped. We find that U.S. manufacturing industries more exposed to tariff increases experience relative reductions in employment as a positive effect from import protection is offset by larger negative effects from rising input costs and retaliatory tariffs. So let me put that in plain English. The tariffs essentially gave a small boost to local manufacturers, right? Which was offset by larger negatives from the effects of rising costs and tariffs put out by China towards our goods. That's a retaliatory tariff, right? So whatever good, and there was a little bit of good from the tariffs, was overshadowed by the disaster. So now look, this is what a lot of people have been saying would happen. Look, you might have a small, decent impact, right? But you're going to end up hurting more than you are helping when you put these tariffs up. So now, that would be maybe acceptable if you had a plan, right? But when you don't have a plan, this is what happens. Basically, you end up getting stuck in a situation where you have to concede. Okay, it turns out the tariffs didn't exactly work. Let's try something else. And then, of course, you give China the upper hand, or whatever country you're negotiating with, an upper hand on trade negotiations. Now, that is something that Donald Trump will never do, give another country the upper hand, or give anyone else the upper hand by conceding. This is not, look, I guess on issues that he doesn't really care too much about, sure, he'll concede on those. But when it comes to trade, a negotiation, the very thing that he says, I'm the greatest at, I can negotiate all sorts of deals, the best deals, the greatest deals. No, he's never going to give up on these tariffs, which means you're going to have continued economic damage as long as Donald Trump's president. It's a disaster, like I said. Now, what are the consequences of the policies in more detail? Well, according to the report, retaliatory tariffs imposed by China and other countries in response to U.S. tariffs have put U.S. firms at a disadvantage in those markets. As a result, employment in manufacturing had fallen and consumer prices have increased. Less jobs, more job losses, higher prices. That's what you get. And again, it's higher prices for consumers, which is exactly what we were saying was going to happen as a result of this ham-fisted, boneheaded policy. Look, now, the jury's out for long term. And look, I say that because, in a way, if you use tariffs strategically, you might be able to get something done. You might be able to use that as a leverage to get some people to the table, right? But that's only if you have a good strategy and a clear objective. President Trump has neither of those things. Trump makes rash decisions based on what he sees on TV with no actual long-term goal or plan to get results. And so this is the result that we have. A trade war that has devastated manufacturers, farmers, and other industries. I've given you, I've shown you a lot of Midwest farmers, right, that are really, really angry about Donald Trump. Some even saying, I'm not going to vote for him. These are Republicans. These are Midwest conservatives who voted with Donald Trump or voted for Donald Trump and said, yes, let's MAGA. And then later on said, oh my God, what are you doing? I mean, look, do you guys happen to notice that things are a little bit more expensive now? Because again, that's one of the results. When stuff gets more expensive for retailers, they will end up passing that cost into you, and that's exactly what happened, thanks to the tariffs. Now, some studies have found that American companies which engaged in trade with China also saw lower stock returns and higher default risk. So, wonderful. That's been fantastic for everybody. Now, let me give you a quote here from ProPublica reporter Lydia Topilis. She says, quote, "It's been a lot of anecdotal evidence about how tariffs are behind the manufacturing slump that we are currently in. Now the Federal Reserve proves it, finding that the trade war is hurting the sector it was ostensibly supposed to help. The White House would say it takes a while for supply chains to adjust, and manufacturers will recover as they find alternative input sources. Also, theoretically, mounting pressure will eventually force the Chinese to knuckle under in a way that will rebalance global trade." So, now, that's what the White House says. Now we look at the reality. There is a lack of any of that. Trump vastly underestimated the Chinese, likely because he has no idea what he's doing. He's not a very smart person. There is no impending trade deal with China. There's no text, no draft, even though he says we're very, very close to a new deal. Where's the text of it then? Where's the draft? Where's something concrete that you can point to and see? No, this is just like the North Korean debacle, where there is no evidence of any sort of deal, and there will be no deal at the end, and we will continue to get shafted. And that really kind of sums up our experiences with Donald Trump. A lot of empty promises, a lot of shafting, and a lot of pain for regular working people. This very same people who voted enthusiastically for him in 2016 and unfortunately may still enthusiastically vote for him in 2020. Disaster. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break. Thanks to patrons, read some comments, and then we'll come back. We got Mitch McConnell screwing over the coal miners in Kentucky. That's a disastrous story. And then we have the Trump plan to privatize the mail. You think it's not already bad? No, it's bad. All right. So we'll be back with those stories. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Consider becoming a channel member or a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation, and we'll be back with some of those comments. We'll see you in a minute.
Mike Pence.
Welcome back to the show. Round the Nation right here. TWT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so first let's get to the patrons. I want to thank Sarge Tech, Ann Summers, and Brian Newton. So thank you, patreon.com/TYT Nation. That's how you can support independent progressive media. There is also channel memberships where we have, and I want to thank newest members, Jonathan Andrzejek, Daniel Van Zalen, and Per Tyran. I don't know if I said that right, but thank you. I'm always do weird with those names with like umlauts, so I probably messed up your name, Daniel. And special characters, because I'm not a special character. Okay, anyway. Or maybe I am, since I don't understand those. Okay, anyway, a little self-deprecation. It's all good. All right, so thank you to those channel members. You can become a member by hitting the join button below. Then let me get to a couple of comments here. Let's see. Jedi Protector says, that's why his professors think he was the worst student they ever had. He does not understand anything, referring, of course, to Donald Trump and his terrible, no good, awful, probably grades. All right. Let's see. RB says, the Midwest farmers are just tired of all the winning. I know, their head has spun so much that it went clean right off. And then you got to put it back on. It's kind of annoying when your head spins off. It spins off from winning so much. So you need to slow down the winning, guys. Let's see. Ravaging Wolverine says, I knew the tariffs were poorly implemented and wouldn't have the desired effect. And my IQ likely isn't 156. You don't have to be a genius to realize Trump's stupid. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. All right. Well, let's just go into some more of the stories here. So let's go to Mitch McConnell. And thank you for the comments, by the way. And no super chats, but thank you for joining as a membership. All right. Somebody always says I always pick the best pictures. It's just something within me that makes me find just like the best pictures of these people. All right. It appears that Mitch McConnell just sold out Kentucky coal miners. So last week, the Republican-led Senate, by the way, passed a massive $1.4 trillion government spending package. Now, there's a lot of things in it, a lot of different things, some of which I spoke about before. But what was missing is something that would have helped some of the more vulnerable constituents of Mitch McConnell. And that would be disabled, sick coal miners. So these people that worked in the coal mines 20, 30 years, and a lot of them have stuff like black lung. Okay, so within that spending package, there's about $15 billion. And that's a 30-year payout to sustain the Black Lung Disability Trust Fund. So that, again, that's for people who can no longer work because they got black lung from working in the mines. Now, as many as 1 in 5 coal miners currently suffer from black lung. Coal mining, as we've seen before, is not only dirty, terrible for the environment, but also dangerous for the people who work at it, and can lead to a lifetime of health problems and even early death. So it's not great. Which, look, I can understand the pride of a lot of people who had worked in the coal mines. Yeah, I worked in the coal mines. My daddy worked in the coal mines. You know, we're tough people. We're good stock, right? Like, we're proud because we built that. We, helped fuel America for so long. I understand that pride. But looking at the environmental cost and the damage that coal itself does, not only that, but the damage it does to the people that mine it and the environment around the mines, I mean, it's not, at this point, it's not even worth it, right? Not only that, but here you have wind energy that is actually far more cost efficient now than coal. So the technology has basically made coal mining essentially obsolete here in America. And so, nonetheless, there are people that have worked in these mines uh, that we owe them to make sure that they are taken care of, right? And more importantly, the coal companies owe these people for them working their lives to be able to enrich the coal mine owners. So that's one of the big problems with this bill that McConnell pushed through is that it made sure that the burden of that, of taking care of these people, does not fall on the coal companies themselves. Now, McConnell, for example, had removed provisions that would have forced coal companies to commit to higher payments towards the health care costs of employees and retirees. He also eliminated proposed requirements to extend the commitment period and modestly increased the tax on coal mining companies that are supposed to support the trust fund. So no increasing the taxes in the coal company to take care of the people who had helped make those coal companies prosperous. So now that means more of that share falls to us as taxpayers and not the coal companies themselves. So that is basically privatizing the profits and socializing the losses. Look, anybody who claims that Mitch McConnell hates socialism, well, you can just point to that. He loves socialism, but for the rich and corporations. He loves redistributing your wealth to the top so that these companies can make an extra buck. That's who Mitch McConnell is. So if you think he's on the side of coal miners, no, he's on the side of coal mine owners, the coal barons. So now here's the other thing about McConnell, right? If you look at his history, if you look at all the decisions that he's made, all the positions that he's fought for and positions that he's fought against, you can realize that he is an unscrupulous politician. So in the end, and by the way, he's actually a very savvy politician as well. He is good at what he does, and what he does best is be evil, but try to look good doing it, right? For example, and there's, I'm going to give you another example of this relating to the coal miners, but I actually want to talk about Connect, which is the Kentucky version of the ACA. That is the marketplace for health insurance. So now Connect was very popular in Kentucky. People liked being able to go and get their insurance from the exchanges. They were actually saving money. Well, you know what Mitch McConnell was doing at the same time? While Connect was hitting popularity, he was railing against Obamacare. Well, Obamacare and Connect are the very same thing, but Connect is just the state version of the Obamacare exchanges that were mandated by the ACA. So he's saying Obamacare, worst thing in the world, terrible. Connect, wonderful. That's the model we should have. He speaks out of both sides of his mouth. And so when it comes to the coal miners, he does essentially the same thing. So he allows these miners to get the funding, right, for the disability from taxpayers, passes that along in his budget bill, $15 billion. However, in that same bill, he makes sure that the coal companies themselves remain untouched. So he's going to spin this to make himself look good in order to win re-election because he has no moral core. He is basically an empty shell. Look, it shouldn't be the taxpayer that's required to pay for the people that were harmed thanks to these corporations. These corporations should be involved directly into making sure they take care of their employees. They should not be getting a pass. These companies either need to pay more in taxes, right, which they should be anyway, or paying, again, directly into these miners' health care and disability benefits while also paying more taxes. They should not be allowed to get away with this. But thanks to people like Mitch McConnell and money in politics, corrupt politicians taking bribes from corporations, this is what happens. This is the result. Mitch McConnell does whatever his donors tell him to, no matter what And then he does it to spin it to make himself look good. Oh, don't worry, I'm just taking care of the coal miners. No, you're not taking care of anybody but yourself and your own political personal interests. Kentuckians actually deserve somebody who will actually represent them and hold these companies accountable and to provide, I think, clean energy and better jobs. All right. Moving on. Let's go to the post office. Last story of the day. Some bad news for anybody who takes getting the mail delivered for free for granted. Recently, the Trump administration, advocates in Congress, and consulting firms like Mayor Pete's former employee, McKinsey & Company, have all called for the privatization of the post office. Now, according to a report in Fortune, that is not some distant Republican goal. It could happen as soon as next month. Now, this all starts with the Trump administration needing to appoint a new postmaster general since the current one is stepping down. And he must do this by the end of January. And so the clock is ticking. Now he can appoint one. Now, what makes this even worse is that the new leadership will be handpicked and approved by the Postal Service Board of Governors. Now, you might think, okay, what's the problem with that, right? This is how it's set up. This is how it's supposed to work. Well, who makes up this Board of Governors? Well, turns out that it's mostly men with it's all men with investment banking and private banking experience. These are corporate guys, 3 of which were appointed personally by the Trump administration. Now, they get to make that decision along with the current Postmaster General and her deputy. Now, the current Postmaster General was appointed by the Obama administration and is fighting against privatization, to be fair. However, I'm wondering if she will get overruled by the very pro-banker, pro-corporate wing of that group, of that board. So I'm really concerned about the direction that this is going. Now, once the new leadership is in place, according to Fortune, the board will be tasked by the Trump administration with creating a package of large structural changes intending to help the ailing postal service. So that's where it gets bad, potentially bad. Now, the post office right now is in a budget crisis. Why? Well, it's because they have to pre-fund healthcare for every single employee. This is something that no other government entity or corporation has to do. But they now especially have to do it thanks to Republicans in Congress. So now, what's interesting about this, right, is that the post office is not federally funded. No taxpayer money goes to the post office. The post office survives on stamps and mailing, their flat rate boxes and mailing packages and things like that. So they do not get any money from Congress. But Congress can control how much money they charge for flat rate boxes and shipping rates and all that stuff. So it's a bit of a strange thing that Congress can make those decisions, and yet they do not appropriate any money for the post office. So now, let me get to where the privatization push comes from. And you might say, well, doesn't it come from them not making any money, having a shortfall? Partly, yes. But the push really came from the Trump administration, who issued an executive order to create a postal task force led by Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Now, they had to put out a report. And again, keep this in mind, right? The fact that Congress does not fund the post office. Quote, the USPS's current business model has become outdated due to changes in technology, markets, and customer needs and preferences. It is unsustainable and must be fundamentally changed if the USPS is to avoid a financial collapse and a taxpayer-funded bailout. Now, there are parts of that are completely untrue. The problem is, it's not that there are changes that impacted them. It's the fact that they are the only agency that is forced to pre-fund employee health care, right? That change, again, which was a result of mainly Republicans, is responsible for 80% of their budget shortfall, meaning that they would still, they would still have a little bit of a problem due to some of those other changes, right? But it wouldn't be as drastic as it is. At this point, they're set to run out of money in 2024. So clock's ticking, right? If you just remove that requirement for pre-funding healthcare, they could be solvent for a lot longer. Now, did the Mnuchin report talk about doing that as a possible solution to this? No, of course not. No, the Mnuchin report said that the way to do this is to sell off pieces of the post office, to privatize it. They recommended that the agency roll back collective bargaining and sell off pieces of the service for private industry. The same OMB report also suggested that the post office should not even be allowed to ship boxes. So now wait, how are they going to make money from that? Well, they're not. How are they going to address their budget shortfall? They're not. They're going to sell off and ban the post office from shipping boxes so they can hand it off to FedEx, UPS, and all their basically donors and say, here you go, you can handle all this now. You can create these monopolies and charge whatever the hell you want to ship a box. And what are we as Americans supposed to do? Well, we're supposed to suck it up and pay our new UPS overlords. That's the situation, right? And of course, prices would go absolutely up. According to the Institute for Policy Studies, they said that businesses from the online retail shops to manufacturers shipping parts to customers in need could face sharply higher shipping costs, leading to higher prices for their customers or lower profits for their businesses. Now, we all know that they would pass on that extra cost to the consumers, so really, we would end up paying way more from shipping that we already do. Small businesses, they said, would also be hit especially hard. What about small business, guys? Since they don't have the clout to negotiate the same level of shipping discounts as big corporations. Not only that, but also privatization would hurt rural Americans. Remember, FedEx and UPS and all the others don't ship out to these rural areas. They rely on the post office to do that. Why? Because there's no money in shipping out to the boondocks. So, ironically, the same people who support privatization of government would be the ones hurt by this. Now, as for the post office, I got to be fair and reference polls that show that there's the post office has a 90% approval rate. And so people love the post office as an institution. They love the idea of the post office, which is government run. And they don't want to see this privatized. So again, let's be fair about that, right? So look, this is a real problem. Do you think the Trump administration would be willing to anger 90% of Americans trying to privatize the post office? I absolutely believe that they would, because they don't care. All they do is serve their donors. And by the way, this isn't just about Republicans. There are Democrats as well. Pete Buttigieg. I mentioned McKinsey, right? Well, part of Buttigieg's McKinsey work was at the post office. In fact, he was there, and he had worked on the post office case when he consulted with McKinsey. Now, Buttigieg's team came out in front of this and denied that he had worked on the efforts, saying that he was, quote, part of a team tasked with generating ideas to increase revenue, like selling greeting cards and increasing the use of flat rate boxes, and had, quote, never worked on cost coding or anything involving staff reorganization or the privatization of essential post office services. However, that comes in contrast to Union President Mark Diemenstein. So now this is Postal Union, right? President Mark Diemenstein. And he had said, or is it Diamonstein? He said that Buttigieg's work And McKinsey's work led to the closing of many mail processing centers, losing people lots of jobs. He said, quote, I will say generally, shame on anybody that was part of facilitating these McKinsey reports. This is the opposite of what the people of this country need. So understand that there is an effort, and has been an effort, to sell the post office to private corporations. And it's a result of years of legislative sabotage and corporate scheming. This is what happens when private industry is allowed to compete alongside a public good. So I feel compelled to point this out as a reason why a public option in our healthcare system would also fail. Because think about it, it would be a lot like this, where you have private corporations, private health insurers, and a public option that would be sabotaged through legislative efforts because of money and politics, and leading, once again, to the privatization and the ending of a public good. So just think about that when you think about, or when you go to check your mail, for one, and when you think about a single payer versus a public option. Okay. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. I do not think I will be here today or tomorrow. Or I'm sorry, tomorrow or the next day. That's, of course, New Year's Eve. I may do something real quick. I don't know. Don't hold me to it. We'll see what happens. I don't know what I have planned tomorrow, so we'll see. But we'll for sure be back on the New Year, the 2nd. So that's on a Thursday. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. Hopefully you have a great New Year's Eve, safe and happy. Have a lot of fun. And we'll come back in 2020 for another great year of shows. So thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you in 2020.
Please clap.
Mike Pence.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.